I was just seeing so many creative people be out of power because of money. If you deal with the finances, you can get past that. If you don't, you're not going anywhere. You can make tiny changes around the edges, but if you want to move the thing, you got to deal with the money. We'd always get stopped with money.
You said that you started following Hannah a while back. What had you do that?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question. Maybe that'll probably lead into something, but I'll just share from my own experience. I have a huge blind spot around taxes when it comes to, especially I do have my own business, but I also have a W-2 and I also have this thing and I also have that thing. And it's very easy to get confused and overwhelmed and get in my head. And so I'm always kind of seeking, like, there's info everywhere, but the challenge is not the information. The challenge is the little bit of information that I need to do the first few steps I need to take, right? Mm-hmm. To get organized. So when I came across your brand, I felt that. I felt this is someone who can guide me from where I am now to where I want to be, which is organized with money, organized with taxes, with my business, having it set up so that it's as stress-free as possible.
Yeah, I like that. And I want to just for a moment hold space for the vulnerable share there, because I feel like it's hard to say. I feel really uncomfortable in this space. A lot of people don't like to admit that, but I also want to normalize it because we don't have a tax education in this country. We should, but we don't. And so that's actually really common. And yet people often feel like, oh, it's just me. I'm the one. I'm somehow behind. So yeah, I just wanted to.
And we mostly learn about it trial and error, by messing things up, by getting in trouble, all of those things. And particularly I know that you, at least I think from what I know, is that you've worked with, a lot of artists and solopreneurs, sole proprietors, if you will, or people with small businesses that are in that freelancer art space, who I've never met any of us who really know anything about taxes. We just do what we can to try to get by, I probably learned more about taxes by doing my own with TurboTax, for 10 years in the 90s than I ever learned. And a lot of that was from making mistakes and owing a lot of money, and things like that.
Totally. And, taxes are retroactive. And so that's how you learn. Unfortunately, you learn because you do it and it was done wrong or messed up. And it's also sometimes, like I say, they're retroactive. Sometimes they're really retroactive. Like an audit letter doesn't typically come until 2 years after 1 year, 2 years, 3 years after you did the thing. And at the time it felt fine. Right. Mm-hmm. And then you get a letter and you're like, oh, now I have to actually go. I hope I have the proof for everything I said there, because I'm not completely sure if I did that right. That's an awful way to learn. But that is some of the people who are good at taxes. That's the reason they're good at it, because that happened to them.
Yeah, it's interesting that you just made me remember that the last time I did my own, we had a child not long before that. So I put him in there as dependent. Mm-hmm. And I had his social security number in there, but he has a hyphenated last name officially that we don't use like at school or stuff like that. So I just put one of the last names in there, and they didn't send back and say that was wrong. They sent me a bill for $12,000 and said, this is how much you owe, because this person you put as a dependent doesn't exist. And it took me, 3 hours on the phone, mostly waiting, to figure out what the problem was to begin with. The fix was easy. All I had to do was correct his name and it all worked out.
Oh, what a painful lesson, though. Yeah.
So I really wonder because I actually have accountants as clients,
Mm-hmm.
and I really want to know, like, how did you, number one, why this space of work, and what drew you towards, I'm going to say people like us, people that are more, freelancer or artist or, outside of the traditional business space.
Yeah. Well, I'm an artist. I started out as an artist. I knew I wanted to be an artist since I could hold a crayon. So, like, I went to art school, and that's where I started. So, and taxes as a professional, and I didn't stop being an artist when I trained as an accountant. I had a solo show 2 months ago. Like, I'm really an artist.
That's awesome.
But taxes just hit me like a shovel to the face when I was starting out in my professional career. I found, I sat down with my dad's accountant, and he was like, "When are you going to get a real job?" And I just felt like I walked into that space with like a residency lined up, like a prestigious residency. I just gotten this big grant. I had a gallery that was courting me for representation. If you're in the art world, you know that means I'm a professional, right? But this guy actually couldn't even tell. He didn't even know what a professional artist looked like. And I was like, how could this guy ever possibly serve me? And not only that, but I felt so disregarded and so judged in that space that there was no way I was going to get vulnerable with him and be like, I kind of don't really know the difference between a Roth and a traditional IRA, or like, this stuff you think is obvious. I don't even know the basic terms. I just wasn't willing to even admit to him that I didn't have even a baseline, and he didn't want to come to me because I was just a weirdo to him, and he's like not particularly interested in gathering more artists, right? I'm not like a good client to him because I've got all the complexity and none of the budget. And so I just realized, like people like me can't get easy access to this information. So it's a much longer story. I had a baby in New York City, and I have a high prestige, low paid art career. And that's all that'll give you some complexes about money really in a hurry, especially when you bring a new human being into the world. And I was like, okay, I need a new plan. I need a way to so I went back to school for accounting, and I just was like, the one part of this that my community, the creative community, cannot avoid is the tax part. So I'm going to help them there, which is the place where they know they need it. So that's how I started my company.
God,
It
that
was really
sounds
just to serve a need.
that sounds so familiar. Having a kid and going, uh-oh, I'm gonna need to start making money now. Yeah.
Yeah, this whole bohemian lifestyle, the living on beans, the like, okay, I'm just going to not drink alcohol for 6 months because that's going to be my solution for my budget.
Right. Yeah, it doesn't work when you have a baby. No.
Yeah, the
not at all.
romance goes out real
in the
fast.
especially in the most expensive city ever where you were.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did the same thing. I was I had like one coaching client, I think, and then we had a kid. I said, uh-oh, I'm going to keep playing music, but it's time to kick this coaching business into gear because,
Yeah.
I love that high prestige, low paid art career. That's fantastic.
Yeah, I have a friend who says artists can be famous and broke.
Absolutely. And a lot of them are.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
When did you start Sunlight Tax? How long ago was that?
Officially in 2016. Yeah.
Cool.
So it was training in other accounting firms up until that point. So it's been since maybe 2013 that I was an accountant and was like training. But yeah, I was like a wolf in sheep's clothing being in other accounting firms. I'm the artist, like they did not. Yeah, it was a real, I actually have had like a lifelong interest in linguistics. And one of my favorite linguists, Deborah Tannen, the revolution in her research is that she started taking this concept of cross-cultural communication. Instead of just saying like, we're going to study, people in Germany versus people in Papua New Guinea, she started flipping the idea of culture to be like, well, actually we have different cultures all over the place. And so she started using cross-cultural linguistics, cross-cultural communication between men and women, or between mothers and daughters, or between, people at work, bosses and employees. And I totally fell in love with that. I actually considered becoming a linguist at a certain point in my life, but I just realized like I actually really enjoy translating between cultures. And that's actually really, when they say like, what's the work you do, but then what's really the work you do?
Oh,
the
yeah,
work I really do is as a translator.
That's totally what you do. I completely get that, translating between artists and accountants.
Yeah.
Totally. And
left brain, right brain.
They're totally different cultures. And in fact, like,
they are.
For good reason, really, but they really like accountants are super conservative, super change averse, super slow to adopt new technology, do not want to stand out. I'm describing the opposite of an artist right now, right?
Yes, you are.
And
That's wild.
They're that way for good reason. I mean, creative accounting is illegal. So,
right.
They're highly they're in a highly regulated field, but they tend to over apply that conservatism. Conservatism does belong on your tax return, does belong in your financial statements, but it doesn't mean you have to be conservative on your Instagram. It doesn't mean you have to be conservative in your branding, so I think they tend to be fearful. I mean, Bill, you were talking about having clients who are accountants, and I'm really curious about that side of it because it can be I imagine that might be a client that's hard to work with or a little resistant to kind of what you're bringing to them. So I don't know. I'm curious about that.
That's interesting. Yes and no. I think some of the things you pointed to around not wanting to adopt new technology. Yeah, there's some resistance there for sure. And it may just depend on how long and how successful that business is, how they're doing. I've had the interesting job of actually helping my client reduce the number of clients she has instead of get more,
Wow.
which is, that's an unusual direction for somebody to take, but she's got a good reason for it. You said something around, that having a child will, of course, change how you're looking at money. And we've done a couple of episodes where we've talked about this from different perspectives. I wonder, from your chair as both artist and accountant and all the people that you've worked with, what do you feel like are some of the biggest either myths and fantasies or stumbling blocks that you see that people have, or people like artists and freelancers, et cetera, have around money?
Well, to give some really tax specific examples, the Schedule C, which is really kind of a wonderful thing. It's the part of the tax return where by default, that's where you put your freelance or self-employed income. So we creative people, in advance of you doing anything more sophisticated or higher level, like forming an S corporation or one of those things, by default, you put you put your income and your expenses on a Schedule C. I find that people, again, there's no tax education, so this is not a place of judgment, but people really have no awareness of the benefits that they're entitled to. And they will say like, oh, I'm not doing a Schedule C yet because I haven't turned a profit yet. And I'm going to literally show you a Schedule C right now. Look at this. See the title? Profit or loss. It's not hidden. It's on the title. And it's like, that is treated like it's some big mystery. And it's actually on the title. And it's, again, that actually speaks to sort of the way that we do taxes in this country. I mean, I'm going to speak to our system for a moment. Like, we allow lobbying, which means that big companies are allowed to use a marketing message to encourage us all to hate taxes, to think it's so complicated we couldn't possibly understand it on our own. It's an anti-empowerment message, because it's much more convenient for them if we would just, be sure we couldn't do it and just hand it all over to them. And I'm really trying to do the opposite. Like, I don't even do people's taxes anymore. I want people to know how it works and take advantage for themselves, and know the fact that just right there in the title, it says you don't have to have turned a profit yet to use this Schedule C. That loss is actually a huge tax benefit for you. Because a loss, when you have a real business with a profit motive, gets subtracted off your other income. So it actually puts cash into your pocket in that hardest year, your startup year, and in a year where something terrible happens to you that may be out of your control, like an earthquake, an illness. If you're a coffee shop and Starbucks opens across the street, things can happen in business. And the US tax code is actually incredibly generous, putting money into the hands of small businesses. And I just find that we're given this message that it's not, and that taxes are horrible. And so I feel a little like David versus Goliath, but I think, it's actually, when you learn about it, it's like there's stuff in there that's really cool and really awesome. And I find the thing that upsets me the most is just that so many creative people just don't realize what they're entitled to.
It feels like there's two sides for me to what you're saying. Is one, since we don't have a tax education, there is this messaging that we get around taxes are bad. We have to pay all these taxes. It's, you just pay. It's all this. Of course, visit another country. When I go to the Netherlands every year, and they pay minimum 50% of their income in taxes. Now, I would argue that they, as a tiny country, they use that tax money, and you can see how they use it in ways that we don't. But we have a giant country to manage. It's a little different scenario. I don't pay 50% of my income in taxes. So there's some weird messaging there that it'd be nice if we didn't have.
Well,
I
definitely.
wonder how,
I feel like for taxes to work, you have to believe in your government, and you have to believe in a representative democracy. And, not believing in taxes is, in a way, it's kind of anti-democratic. And so I grew up in Massachusetts, and there's a little joke about Massachusetts that is Taxachusetts. But there's another side to that. It's the best public education system in the country. Also would be 6th in the world in ranking if it was its own country. And Massachusetts had the first public library, the first public beach, the first public grazing grounds, the first public, like this huge list of first public whatever. And that sense of common good and taxation, and a sort of trust that taxes, and we're well represented, and we can have our interests represented, and we can have more public good when we have, we're making a decision as taxpayers to do this stuff. So we get great schools, and we get good, Massachusetts has free healthcare. It has universal healthcare, and okay, Taxachusetts, but a lot of benefit.
right.
Yeah, there's a huge disconnect between what taxes even are and what that grants you. I mean, it's a huge privilege to be able to pay taxes, and I think that's a big part of that education gap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I didn't mean to get so political on this episode, but it's a project. It's not an accident. It's not an accident.
Yeah, and it's interesting too. We mostly compare it, like in my comparison, I'm comparing a country that's about the size of Massachusetts, maybe even smaller. right? That's a lot different to manage than all of these little states that are like their own countries. We're here in Texas. We don't have a state income tax. New Hampshire, right next to Massachusetts, no state income tax. So I think it becomes more difficult sometimes to see where your tax dollars are going in a place like this, because I just pay the federal government and I have absolutely no idea what happens to that. I have some, I'm grown up enough that I can find out if I want to, or I can take a look at it. But as an education piece, nobody's ever really talked to me about that. And some of the things that they would say, I'd be like, well, I don't want that, or that doesn't help me in any way. Right. So yeah,
It's
there's
a huge
definitely
accomplishment.
there's a gap for sure.
There's a definite gap, and it's a huge accomplishment, honestly, to have a democracy this big and this diverse. It's never been done historically. Most of the countries that we hold up as being, functioning really, really well are pretty homogenous. Like, maybe there's some disagreement and trouble reconciling in the U.S., but like, I don't know about you. I just took a trip to Santa Fe, and I was like, oh my God. Like, the food is completely different here. The people, like, I go to this food truck and the menu's entirely in Spanish. Like, this is quite a different culture from Asheville, North Carolina. I live in Appalachia. It's a totally different world. So the fact that we reconcile these things is actually like a huge accomplishment. But like, we have to have empathy with each other. We have to sort of like feel a common bond and a common interest. And, actually, just to bring this full circle to creative people, that's actually why I do the work I do, because I think creative people, design is empathy. Like, creative people are the empathy builders of our culture. And without that empathy, without that common understanding, without that common vision of like, we are taxpayers in the United States, we believe in the nation, we believe in a common interest. You can see that has disintegrated to a point of scariness around us. And I think we're the ones who have to rebuild it.
Miles and I don't always do very well with discipline, consistency, and grinding our way through the creative process.
We're also tripped up with things like overwhelm, imposter syndrome, perfectionism, and lone wolf syndrome on a weekly basis, and it's not a good feeling.
So a couple years ago, we created The Box to solve our own problem. The Box is a container and community for creatives to stay accountable, do the work, and actually finish what they started. We help you prioritize your projects and create a box around it.
We co-work twice a week for 90 minutes and support you in bringing projects to the finish line. It's not teaching you anything new. It's giving you the structure to focus and create with what you already have.
Because amazing things happen on the other side of finished. Come try it out and see how it feels at theboxcommunity.com.
Wow. Creatives are the empathy builders. That hit deep with me. That's really cool. Talk about giving so much importance and value to creatives that can easily be overlooked. I'd love to go back to 2016, maybe even a little before, and just hear kind of how you were able to, you saw this interest and you saw the importance of tax and money, and then you learned it and you practiced it, and then you started your company and your brand. And I'd love to hear kind of the overview of how you were able to grow that. How were the first few years? How was it kind of getting that momentum going? Everything from just keeping organized and getting clients. And then now you have a substantial audience, it looks like, and a following and clients. And how did you organize all that? And how did you get how did you go from there to where you are today?
Oh my gosh. I think about this journey a lot because it's a strange one, but just in terms of money, like, I think I always knew that you'd have to deal with money if you wanted to really get stuff done. That, even because I was kind of you could probably kind of hear it in my way of speaking. I was a bit of an activist growing up, still am. And we'd always get stopped with money. you'd get to the big head honcho and they'd be like, this is a lovely campaign you're running, little girl. But, ultimately we're going to make the decision based on the finances. So I just learned early on through that like, well, if you deal with the finances, you can get past that. If you don't, you're not going anywhere. You can change, you can make tiny changes around the edges, but if you want to move the thing, you got to deal with the money. So I think that's why I felt like it was a sort of center of power. And to me, I was just seeing so many creative people be out of power because of money. And so that's really why this feels like a real way to empower creative people. But oh my gosh, when I started, first of all, everyone told me I was crazy. Nobody thought it would work. Even just doing like business courses, they say like, do your market research. You should see, you guys probably know the stats on this much better than I do, but they say like, you should see some competitors. That's proof of the market. And I didn't see any. I was like, I really don't know if this will work because I really don't see anyone doing this. And I was warned against it by every accountant. They're like, oh my God, why on earth would you want to work with creative people? They're flaky, they're disorganized. Their books are just as hard and complicated as our other business clients, but they don't have the money to pay you. So it was a journey.
Yeah.
And I definitely had the feeling of like pushing the flywheel and, like you do that and you kind of push and you push, you do your smartest, best work and you don't really hear feedback immediately, And so it's interesting because now I'm years down the road and it's actually starting to come back to me now. I'm like, oh, okay, that paid off, but it's years down the road. So I'm glad I made it. I'm glad I made it through that hard part. Yeah.
Yeah. There's always opportunities to quit. There's always that voice and challenges that just make you want to think that you're not cut out for it. And I'm assuming, especially in the path that you carved, which was not very carved before, it was probably potentially a loud voice. Did you have moments where you had that voice? What's your relationship with that voice? Have you do you still have that voice today, like the imposter syndrome voice, the getting overwhelmed and thinking I'm not cut out for this? How did you overcome that voice, and does it still talk to you today?
Yeah. To be totally frank with you, I really didn't quite. I mean, I felt scared. The fear I had when I started was I don't know enough. Because the tax code is vast. There is no one who can specialize in all of it. You just can't know it all. And so I really felt like my power was going to have to be pretty narrow. So my strategy there was to just have the narrowest focus I could. I was like, I can nail it. If you're a client in this tiny little sliver, I can nail it for you. Like that's what I aimed for. Now I'm getting better at a little bit wider, but it's not that wide. Like I have a pretty specific client. So that was really my fear. They'd start to realize that I was a safe person to talk to about this stuff. And they'd start bringing me all these questions about business formation and legal things. And I was like, at first I felt terrible that I didn't know. But then I was like, I'm not a lawyer. It's okay that I can't give you legal advice. I'm actually not trained in that. That is actually someone else's job. But the feedback has been from artists and creative people has been, just like a water in a sponge, just like, oh my God, where have you been all my life? So I have to say like the feedback there has been so positive that I don't feel like an imposter in that sense. Like, it's like the need is so evident. My challenge is just like creating enough boundaries and that I'm like, okay, I'm only going to answer these questions. I'm not your girl for all the legal stuff and, super complex tax situations. So boundaries has kind of been my challenge.
I think it's really fascinating that your fear of not knowing enough had you pick this really narrow, customer And that's exactly what everybody is told to do when it comes to marketing their business, is pick the narrowest niche possible, which for a lot of people and what they do is super hard, myself included. It's really difficult for people to do that. I listened to it all. I was actually just on a call with a bunch of people, and there's people struggling with that. It's really hard. And how awesome that the thing that you were afraid of actually naturally had you do that. It wasn't even a question. Hey, this is what I'm going to do. That's awesome.
It's true. I think it's luck. I think I got lucky. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fascinating because it's such a I don't know, analytical, specific way of thinking, and you have to kind of be that expert. Like, people come to you with all these questions. I've done it. I've been that person. So I totally see that, and I could see how that would force you to set those boundaries and pick a lane and zone in. And then really what I heard that really stood out was like you had at one point or another, you realized I'm not the expert on all this stuff, and you can just be a soundboard. You can be curious with them. That's something I've been trying to work on lately, is if I don't have an answer, if I don't have the perfect strategy for someone and I think they expect that of me, it's like, no, just be a curious person with them, right? Or set that boundary if you need to, and kind of push them in the right direction is so much more sustainable for everyone.
Totally. I also think I saw a hole in the market that other people didn't see. I think creative people are good at this. We're good at seeing holes. I actually learned a lot about the superpowers of creative people when I was in school for accounting, because I was suddenly amongst people who didn't have the superpowers I was used to people having. But I think honestly, one of the things was my standard of living was so low that I was like, oh, this is easy. This is working fine. And other accountants were like, you're making so little money. Why would you want to do that? I was like, have you seen what it's like to be a painter? It's like, everybody needs a tax return and they know it. And I don't have to push them on the deadline. I've got this huge government agency who tells them their deadline. Like, I don't even have to be the bad guy.
And it's somewhat, I would think too, for your artist career, it is somewhat seasonal if you're doing returns, right? So you can get a certain amount done and then you can go focus on something else and come back to it later, which, it's not like being a school teacher, but it's pretty close.
That was my original vision. I mean, I originally picked it because it was seasonal and because I liked that deadline. That deadline is my friend.
Yeah.
Because I was like, April 20th, I will be in the studio. See you later. Don't talk to me. So then, of course, once the flywheel started going, that started getting harder. When I had this show deadline, I had a show in November, and my gallery was like, how you doing? And I was like, I forgot how hard.
Yeah. So how do you find that? That's really interesting, because I balance these two, different things as well, with music and coaching and business stuff. What's that balance like for you?
Balance feels like an unattainable ideal to me. It honestly feels like I'm happier when I don't even use that in my vocabulary, because I don't really have a lot of balance.
I kind of like the word harmony in place of balance sometimes, because it allows for the chaos a little more.
Yeah, I like that too. I think about seasons. Like, I can't contact switch. I cannot just be in the teeny tiny, high accuracy world of tax returns and then just go into my studio and be creative. I don't find it easy to go back and forth between those brains. And I'm kind of a ADHD brain. Like, I can hyper focus, but I don't want to have to move out of the thing I'm focused on. So I think in seasons. I'm in tax season and I do all taxes. I am all in. I'm completely focused on it. I don't think about anything else. Then I go to art season and I can kind of like be in the studio, be creative. And actually a lot of ideas about my tax business will come to me in that season. But I'm kind of, it's looser. I'm like, there's less like pressure and focus in that season. So
I love the seasonal reference. That's fantastic. That's great.
Yeah.
I think the same way. Please know that when I say the word balance, because I know that can be weird, and I think we have weird definitions of it. But if you ever stand on one foot, on a balance beam or something, you're never still. It's always you're always back and forth. You're always adjusting and moving and changing, and I think we think of balance as like this perfect sort of stillness, where we hold all the things in just the right space, and that doesn't happen with anything. There's always this motion and back and forth, and sometimes I'm leaning over to the left really hard until I correct, and then I'm leaning over to the right, and
Yeah, I like that. I like that a lot. Although I might like seasons even more because it's like
I do too.
It doesn't go winter, summer, winter, summer. It's winter.
Right.
And
winter.
You're in it for a while and you're doing winter.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually I just wrote a thing about that around honoring the season, because I think sometimes I get in a season because mine changed. Like this winter, I'm focused on one thing, and next winter I might be focused on something else. I don't have the April tax deadline, so I don't have to worry about that. But whatever season it is, my job is to honor that and not think that I should be doing something else.
Yeah. It's hard to get to that point. I think that's awesome that you are.
Yeah. I'm old. It helps.
I feel that every day.
I'm wondering, you made mention of it earlier, around that we get a lot of messaging. Taxes are hard. If you mess it up, you're going to get in trouble. So you should just let, some big, I'm not going to say their name, company do it for you. But there's also things like, like I mentioned it earlier. There was a period of time, especially before I had an S corp for a business, where when I was just doing my Schedule C sole proprietor thing and doing it myself, I found something like TurboTax to be really helpful, only because I didn't have to do the math. I could just fill out everything I needed to fill out as long as I, and this was the part that I had to figure out, as long as I had all that information available to me. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you feel about those kind of solutions for people?
Well, on a larger and more macro scale, the way that they operate their businesses, I'm not such a huge fan of. But
Me too.
On the micro consumer level, like when you're interfacing with that software, I do think it's good. I mean, it's good. It's a good product generally.
Yeah.
And I like what I really like about it. Admittedly, I use kind of like big fancy tax software for tax professionals now. I haven't actually used like TurboTax in a while, but I like how they ask you questions in a sort of more human-centered way. They ask you questions you understand the meaning of. The thing that I think is a little tough about it is it's not there to educate you, and it's not explaining always what it's doing in the background. Like sometimes there are actually decisions that you are making as you answer those questions. Like, for example, whether your art practice is a hobby or a business. That's a huge decision that you really could use some guidance around probably. And if you understood that when they asked a certain friendly question that's what they were getting at, you might answer in a different way. So it's the black box nature of it. I find that's what I don't like about it. But the friendliness of the questions, I think, is great. Like that's actually nicely designed. So
Yeah. Got it.
Well said. That's interesting. Are there any, because we're kind of dipping into this world a little bit, if someone, I mean, are there any universal, I know everyone's different and every use case is specific to them, but are there any kind of universal philosophies, or I'll even go as far as saying tools or methodologies that you would recommend to anyone listening who's kind of falls in the category of, your audience, like creative, freelancer, is their own business, or maybe has a combination of their own business and something else that you can share to kind of just help like them get unstuck potentially?
I like
sure.
how you just stuck yourself in there. It's a combination of their own business and something else. That was good, Miles. That was a great way to go. Hannah, listen, I could use some advice. Is there?
I thought I got that one past you. I guess not.
You didn't get
Nice
it past
work.
Bill.
Nice work.
You can bill me later.
I like what you said, Bill, about just like the quality of the records that you bring to the tax return process is, of course, key to how well they get done. That's true. But to help with that issue, I think like one basic principle, and I could teach you about how to pay yourself. That might be helpful for your audience. One of the principles that really helps and is protective to you is to open a separate bank account for your business expenses and income. To some people that may seem obvious, but I know I have worked with enough people who don't have that I know it's not obvious enough. But opening a separate bank account, and it doesn't even have to be like technically a business bank account according to what your bank rules are. It can just be a personal account, but you treat it as solely business. So you deposit your business income there. You only make your expenses out of that. The beauty when you do that is that it becomes a record for you, right? A clean record of everything coming in and going out of your business. And that is the basis of bookkeeping. So from that, you can either enter it all into a spreadsheet, or you can enter it into bookkeeping software. A good software will play well with your bank and actually automatically download your bank statements, which should even make it easier. So that's kind of the very first ground level step for making your finances trackable and work better. It's also very protective for you legally and tax-wise. So it's a good idea on many multiple levels.
Beautiful.
But if you want me to talk about how to pay yourself, people get confused there.
I love that.
Okay, cool. So it is really important that your business bank account stays business only. And so you shouldn't be making personal expenses out of it. And you should deposit all your business income into it. But people have this question mark, like, well, how do I pay myself? Or how do I, what about my rent? Like, and of course, the point of forming a business is not to build up a stash of money in a hermetically sealed account that you're not allowed to touch, right? We make businesses to fund our lives fundamentally. So I think when you're a lay person, there's some magic that knowing about accounting can unlock for you here. So when you're a lay person, you tend to think about bookkeeping in two categories only. You think of income and expenses. That's the intuitive way to think of it. And that's how bookkeeping existed, like when the ancient Egyptians were doing it. But I'm going to get a little nerdy on you here, but the Medici,
Please.
Which were like the fancy, wealthy family of the Italian Renaissance. Well, not only did they fund the Sistine Chapel, they also had the best accountants. And their accountants invented this method called double entry bookkeeping. And it was considered so powerful that it was actually called witchcraft. And it's what we use today. And double entry bookkeeping, there's a whole third category that touches everything. And that third category is called equity. And you can think of equity like investment. And so in double entry accounting, 2 accounts are touched at every time, not one. And so, for example, if I buy $5,000 worth of canvas in my art studio, my canvas account will go up by 5,000 and my cash account will go down by 5,000. So that's the double part of double entry. So I'm giving you a little, maybe more background than you wanted, but equity, in other words, is investment into and out of your business. It represents ownership of the business. So if I buy an equity, like we call stocks on the stock market, we call them equities because it's that. You're buying ownership of a company. You're not buying the product of a company. So if I buy Coke shares on the stock market, I own a piece of Coca-Cola, but I haven't bought any Coca-Cola, right? If I did, that would be income that Coca-Cola had to report, and it would be taxable. But actually, equity is not taxable, though it is money. It's cash. Their cash account goes up. So the thing about equity is that that's what you're moving back and forth when you move your money between your business account and your personal account. So what goes into your business account, income that goes in, that's taxable. Expenses that come out, those are deductible. So the stuff in the business account, that's all taxable. But moving it back and forth, this is equity transfers, and the tax return doesn't even see it. So when I pay myself, I make an owner's draw, and I remove money from the business account and pull it into my personal account. That's a reduction of the equity in the business, and that's the right and proper way to pay yourself when you're a freelancer. But it's not an expense. It doesn't go on my tax return as an expense of the business. It's actually invisible to taxes. So that's the kind of weirdness where you think that tax is all accounting, but actually it's only a certain kind of accounting and it doesn't translate completely. So I find, again, here's me as like the translator. I feel like some understanding of that helps release you like, oh, okay, I can legitimately pay myself. It's just what you don't want to do is use your business debit card to buy groceries or pay your rent, because now you're actually making an expense that is non-deductible out of your business account, and that's a no-no. That's where you get into trouble. Yeah.
Wow. That makes a lot of sense. There were some parts where I was losing you, but then at the end I got you. Which I really appreciate, because this is something that it's not explained well. It's just explained either on the surface or it's super jargony. And
Yeah.
I love that you call yourself a what's the
Translator?
word?
Translator?
Yeah, the translator. That's so perfect.
Thanks. Yeah. I should have mentioned you can pay yourself too. You can move money into your business account too. That's another, like, invest into your business. That's the other direction. It can go two ways.
Beautiful.
But, yeah.
What another big question I have is, because I've recently gone through this, I had the person that helped me every now and then was no longer able to help me for their personal reasons. And then I found myself flying solo, and I wanted to find someone I could trust to help me with, all this stuff. Basically like a consultant, someone like yourself I can just ask, and they can maybe get their hands dirty a little bit to maybe catch me up to a certain point, but then they can help me set things up. How do you find, obviously you, and how do you package up your how do you serve your people is one question I have. And then what's a good way to find help in this arena?
Yeah. I am all in on the education piece. I now no longer do taxes myself, but I have a program called Money Bootcamp, which is like an education program. It's like pre-recorded courses, and it comes with a bookkeeping system. And part of what I love doing in it is I also give tax updates. So I stay up to date with tax laws that affect freelancers. So that's my program, because I'm really passionate about teaching creative people how to have power with this stuff. And also the other side of it is away from the immediate, like getting your taxes done, but it's also using the advantages that the tax code gives you, like retirement funding that's tax deductible. So setting up retirement stuff is so important. It's another piece of tax education that you don't get when you pay for a tax return. So I want creative people to have money. I call it FU money.
Love it. I love that.
Thanks. In terms of finding someone good to do taxes, I'm always happy to give people referrals. I do try to keep up to date with some good people. I try to give a range from cheap, because that's what some people need. They need some help, but they don't have a lot of funds. So I have inexpensive people. And then I've got more full service. You're always going to pay when you're getting good service. So you got to, there's some balance to be had there.
Yeah.
I think if you have a tax preparer who does not ask you any questions, that's a warning sign. So you got to be careful. That is someone who's making assumptions. And so if you've worked with them for 10 years and they don't ask you questions because they've gotten to know your situation really well, that's a different story. But if you're working with them year 1, year 2, and they don't ask you anything, that is a tax mill. They're just pushing people through, and they're not interested in getting it completely right. So that's a warning, I would say.
Yeah.
Well, Hannah, I know that you don't have a lot of time left. And there's 2 things I really got to know. One is a question we ask everybody. Do you consider yourself more introverted or more extroverted?
Oh, I love that. I am technically, I grew up thinking I was shy, and then I realized I love people. Technically, I'm an extrovert. I love being around people and get energy from it. But I also love solitary time. I deep dive alone in my studio. I write. I do lots of solitary stuff, and I love it. So I'm a little bit right on the line.
Awesome. It's going to be easy for people to find you for Sunlight Tax because, of course, we're going to put that in the show notes, and we've talked about it a bunch. But where do we go? How do we see your art?
Ah, I love that. Okay, so speaking of not being in balance, I do have an artist website that is embarrassingly out of date. That's hannahcole.net. But my gallery's website has images from my recent show, my most recent work. So she's the Tracy Morgan Gallery in Asheville, North Carolina. So shout out to Tracy Morgan. On that website, you can see actually my most recent work. And feel free. Awesome. I'd just be delighted.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for hanging out with us and beginning to translate tax for us.
I'm happy to come back and answer listener questions or do some more.
Yeah.
But I'm so honored to be asked. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Hannah.
Awesome.
That wraps another episode of The Subtle Art of Not Yelling, your home for creative growth.
If our words have resonated with you, subscribe, share, and leave us a review. It means a lot and helps us reach more creative entrepreneurs.
Join us next week as we continue to explore the art of quietly becoming a creative superpower and thriving without yelling.
Until then, keep nurturing your ideas, honing your craft, and shipping your work.
Because amazing things happen on the other side of finished.